Back again. We have been MIA for a couple weeks. We're excited to bring a very important topic today to our series. So that is going to be on, can you be a champion? Can you be successful in the sport of bodybuilding while also being a human? And we're going to discuss what it's like to humanize the process and what that actually looks like when you're trying to be successful in this sport too. So, of course, you guys, if you're just tuning in now for the first time to this series, I'm here with Adam Atkinson. He is my coach. And then I am Celeste Rains Turk, and I'm a mental health professional. I bring that to this industry while Adam does a lot more than just macros, as he would say. And I focus on building more than just a body. So it's always a perfect fit. So, Adam, let's kick it off. What does it even mean to humanize the process?
Yeah, when I think of humanizing the process, I think of maybe less rigidity. Actually, talk to somebody, make changes that are complementary to their lifestyle. And that's why I kind of hate the term lifestyle coaching. It should just be called coaching, because if you're truly getting coached, you're getting coached to your lifestyle, whether that be competing or not competing. It is just coaching that you're signing up for. So, you know, are, you know, can we humanize that process by meeting the people where they are? Are vacations important to them? Are weekends important to them? Uh, do they have other activities they enjoy beyond lifting? Maybe they like rock climbing. Can we fit that into their programming somehow? Even if they need to build muscle, maybe we pull back a day so they can enjoy that activity since it's physically pretty demanding. I have people who do triathlons in the off season. It's actually two groups of friends, and that's why they hired me. And they were like, "There's no one else who will work with us on this," and so we humanize the process for them by letting them do those triathlons, Iron Mans, and stuff like that while they're in the off season.
I think that's a great point too, what you said right off the bat, which is, why is it being called lifestyle coaching if it is supposed to be just your life with coaching, and having coaching actually complement your life? I think it's become a buzzword, but like so many things in the fitness industry become buzzwords. And that's an easier way to sell it because it separates the coaches who also offer competition coaching. It lets them say, well, I also offer non-competition coaching, right? But I think that what's most important is the point that you're making, which is that the coaching should fit your life. And I have so many clients who say to me that they are concerned that they can't be both a competitor and other roles in their life. So, and a family woman and a family man and a athlete in these regards. And it makes me sad because, like we talked about in a previous episode, like it really should fit into your life. Competing should fit into your life, and it should be something that adds value. And when I think about humanizing from a mental health perspective, it means looking at the person as more than an athlete. So if someone comes to me as an athlete, I'm seeing beyond that. There's so many characteristics and there's so many life events that have probably led them to being a successful athlete or led them to the pursuit of becoming a successful athlete. And some of those things might be being challenged or maybe even being uplifted in this lifestyle. However, there's something that's keeping them from feeling that they can have multiple roles and still be successful. And I really think that it's the narrative in the industry that tells competitors, you always have to be perfect. You can't sacrifice this. If you're not dotting your I's and crossing your T's like all these people are, then you're not going to be successful like they are, and you can't expect it. So what would you tell an athlete who feels like they need to do every single thing to a T, have perfect, what's perfect, when you have to stick to your plan perfectly? I just forgot the word for that. But when you have to be perfectly on point with your plan, how would you communicate with them? Like, okay, we can actually make this less intensive and still get you to your result.
Absolutely. I start thinking about the micromanaging of coaching that I'm seeing, where clients come off of a prep and they're going into the off season and their coach still has them tracking their steps or doing all these really small things that just really don't matter all that much. And I think there's a time and place for that. And it's kind of teaching your athletes, when do these things matter and why might we track them? I actually had a while ago, two girls from the same team sign up with me, and they were on a really rigid meal plan. They were counting steps. They were trying to get their menstrual cycles back, and they were tracking their water. They were tracking their sleep. Like, just everything was down to the numerical. And one of the girls got her cycle back in 2 weeks with me because we stopped worrying about all that small stuff. I said, are you sleeping 8 hours a night every night and just logging it as spreadsheet for the sake of logging it as spreadsheet? And she was like, yes. I was like, well, let's stop doing that and just make sure you try to get close to 8 hours a night. I don't want you tracking any more steps. And I truly believe that she responded better because the lack of stress that it took to just track that data that she didn't really need to be tracking. So I want to use that as a example because I think people are like, well, if you're not tracking everything, how do you know? And it's, yeah, that's great. You don't really need to know that stuff at this point in time. And that's a great example of how someone actually responded better by not being so militant in the process. You know, they were able to restore their period right away by just kind of chilling out a little bit. And I think that's where this area is hard for people, because where do we draw that line? You know, so obviously we don't want to get to a point where we're not tracking any of our meals. And this is where I think you really have to individualize the process. Some people, from a macro and activity perspective, are going to be able to afford the, you know, the Ferrari in the budget of how relaxed they can be.
Mhm.
And some people are going to have to get the base model. And life is not always fair. And I think this is where we kind of had the tortoise and the hare mentality. Those people who maybe don't have that great genetics, if they do have the slow and steady pace and the determination, this is how they catch the rabbits in the race. And I think this is where it gets really interesting. We also don't want to put those people in a position where we're monitoring everything because they have a little bit less of a budget, but we might have to budget that stuff a little bit more closely. So I kind of wanted to at least bring up this topic that's really long-winded, but that is kind of a baseline of how I start my flexibility with my athletes in the off season. Obviously, prep is the point where you do want to turn it on. I would say as loose as I get is probably having a client do an untracked day instead of a refeed. Caitlin Ray, who just competed, is a great example of having the ability to be able to do that, but not all of my clients can do that. And that's where coaching dynamics really come into play.
Definitely. You have to understand your client, not just from the physiological perspective, but psychologically, what kind of choice would they make if given the opportunity to make choices like that too? And which option are they more likely to take as well? And when I was hearing your first part of that, what came to mind was mental load. How can we reduce the mental load someone is carrying to support them in actually having better results? So if mentally you're coming into an improvement season, let's say, and you're not just now thinking about all the things you did on prep, but you're also managing all the areas of your life that maybe have taken a backseat or taken a hit because of prep, it's gonna feel very difficult, very stressful. You're gonna be like, I just want some relief. I want to get something that feels better, and that can lead to unhealthy coping mechanisms. For what I see a lot is the food relationship or extreme exercise manipulation to support the body image and looking or maintaining a particular way, and we don't want to see that happen. So mental load is very important to consider. So when we are going into a prep and an improvement season, we want to think about, what is our current mental load? What am I prepared to take on? And what am I okay with letting go of? If it's too scary to let go of tracking for a day and having an untracked day, maybe you let go of tracking steps instead, right? Maybe you start with that, and we slowly can reduce mental load in other ways. And even from what I do, it's like, okay, we don't need to think about take away, take away, take away. We need to think about add, and then see what naturally kind of takes a back seat because of that. So we add mindfulness. What do we lose? Maybe we lose hyperfixation on something. Maybe we lose a degree of judgment that previously existed. And then to your next point as well, when we are looking at what it takes to be successful, we also can't say, nah, just don't do anything anymore. Get rid of all the tracking, get rid of all of the meal prep, get rid of everything. Maybe there's a time and a place for a vacation mode to turn on, and sometimes that is nice. Or maybe, like for me, there's been times where I'm like, I just need to listen to my hunger cues right now, my fullness cues, and step back. And that actually gave us more insight into what was happening with my body. But it took me a lot of mental growth to get to a place where I could even communicate with a coach and say, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I need to do, or be able to actually honor myself as an athlete who wants to be in this for the long run. And that, to me, like you said, is going to lead someone who, hey, me, not super genetically predisposed to being able to handle a lot of food and low cardio and kind of cruising into a show. Like, we have to work, we have to put in a lot of that effort. But I know that because I've taken steps to support my longevity from a mental and physical standpoint, and having an amazing coach, I'm able to then progress, I think, for many years. And I'm not burnt out because I'm not expecting things that I'm not yet prepared to expect of myself. And that's where I think self-efficacy comes into play. And I'll hand this off to you next, but self-efficacy is like, we're going to build small wins to eventually challenge ourselves more. And sometimes when I see people getting so detached from the process and losing themselves in it, is because they're expecting themselves to behave in a way that is similar or mirroring someone else they see, without consideration for all the steps that that person had to take and go through to get there. So we have to consider, where am I at? What steps do I need to take that are challenging enough to make me a better athlete, but not so challenging that I want to run away from this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think of one of my clients who's very new into the sport with that, and she really wanted cheat meals in her, you know, weekly setup instead of refeeds. And we were already kind of having some adherence issues in general. And I thought, I like the idea that you want this, but I think we maybe need to work towards that maybe at a later time, because right now you're already struggling with very concrete numbers. And I think if we give you that day of freedom, it's just going to be too much. We're also running out of time on the prep. And I said, this is something really good for us to explore way far out in your next prep and see if it works for you. But she obviously sees a really major athlete doing this. She showed me who the competitor was, and I see why she is kind of curious about doing everything that athlete did. And I just had to explain to her, you understand that the cheat meal isn't what's necessarily making her look like that. You're putting one part of the process and almost giving yourself permission because this person looks so good. And I think a lot of times with that, we're asking ourselves for permission because they do it, we should be able to. And that really isn't always how it works, because there's a whole mindset thing behind that. And we really need to have that first before we, move on. And I do like to use that as an example. Or sometimes people think I need the same coach as so-and-so had. And then they get with that coach and they realize that they are so nervous with the way they're being treated that their body doesn't even respond well because they're so worried about that coach's feedback and how they'll give it to them, and they're worried about being yelled at, and because of that their body doesn't necessarily respond as it could.
That's so true. I love that example so much. Like, looking at one part of the process and thinking that's why that person's successful because of the cheat meal or the cheat day, when in reality, that's not the reason why that person is successful. And what they forget to account for is also, yeah, probably the meticulous effort that's being put in and day out outside of that cheat meal, and potentially an even steeper caloric deficit that someone who's following more of a refeed type of strategy wouldn't necessarily have to take, potentially, because everything is accounted for. But until they can account for that, it makes sense. And I just think I wanted to repeat that because I think it's such a great example. And when I also think about humanizing the process, that communication piece is major. We need to not just be able to communicate with our coach, but also we think about family, we think about coworkers, we think about anyone that we might run into, even other competitors. How we communicate really matters. And I think what happens is people get used to putting so many things to the side, family, friendships, work, that then when their prep is done and now they have to reintegrate all of that, they do think that it's this pendulum because they end up swinging back to the other side. Now I'm going to go out drinking and eating and doing all these things, or I'm not going to have time for this, or I have to put all my time in my family and kids because I didn't give them any time. And I think that's really sad, actually, because if having a prep that takes you an extra, let's say 8 weeks even, means more time with your family or more time with your friends or time with your kids, that to me makes so much more sense than a shorter prep where all those important players in your life are put to the side. So when it comes to humanizing the process, it's also communicating what matters to you. Like we talked about values, go back to that. How do we incorporate that into a prep, into an improvement season? So we're not reinforcing this belief, unfortunately, that you can either be this or that. And instead we start proving and creating a new association between success in competing and success in all these areas of your life too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone measures success differently. So exactly why we talk to people about this and what's important. And you may have weeks that are just maybe next impossible to actually hit your goal. And maybe we take those as diet break weeks. You know, you may have a vacation. We may take a couple weeks to prepare metabolically for that vacation. And there are just a lot of different ways you can swing this. Now, one thing that I do like to put out there and get people thinking, this is a sport. And do you think people don't play games with each other and post this meal and say, you know, I'm 8 weeks out and I just had a stack of pancakes? Like, you know what? I want to see those pancakes go down and stay in your system for 2 hours after, because you can post whatever you want. And if you catch your competitor at a weak moment, they're like, well, they must be ready because they had this, you know. People can play games, so you should never let what someone's doing influence you in your feels. Because you could post back and say, staying on my diet perfectly, everything's going to plan. There are games to the social media thing, and competing is not for the weak, but there are some weak people that do it, and sometimes stuff like that throws people off their game.
Oof, Adam, are you seriously like, first of all, I didn't even think about that, but that's so important because I usually see it from the other side. People posting that they're being perfectly unplanned. And then I'm like, I know you're not, like, not even just from a coaching perspective, but even like from a friendship or acquaintance perspective. I'm like, that's not what's happening. Or you see people who do post like, yeah, I just had all of this, but as you said, are they also then going and running 10 miles to try to work it off? Or are they fatiguing themselves in some way or restricting? So the message there is not to compare to another person's journey. And as you said, success is defined in different ways. So it's also interesting because if someone looks at being able to eat a bunch of junk, let's say, as success, we might even have to wonder, well, when did you decide that was success? Because if that doesn't make you feel good, doesn't make you function well or perform well, but it fits in your macros, is it really success? And I think there's a lot of layers to that, but knowing what actually matters to you in an industry where you're going to be told what should matter to you, I think is really key, because you can get there and sure, it may not be on your heart to go pro and become an Olympian, but it may be on your heart to at least bring your best every single time. And even those who do want to go super far, I do believe it is possible with a flexible or more balanced approach. Now, one person's balance might look different than somebody else's, but I would actually argue that the person who has other things that they can focus on in their life outside of competing is going to feel more satisfaction in the long run than someone who doesn't.
1000%. I think there's also this narrative where people make up like, well, that meal looks like second call outs, or,
Oh,
you hear people say stuff like that, or like second place is last place, or you shouldn't go to nationals unless you win an overall. Like, actually, most of my people that turned pro didn't win an overall that season because they were already qualified for the season before. They didn't even do a warm-up show, or they may not have even won an overall this season prior. It's just so funny that people have made up this structure and how things must flow, and it's so variable, and it just shows how close-minded people are. And this is why we do podcasts like this, is to get you guys thinking and thinking about yourselves and what you want out of one, your bodybuilding career, but if you are hiring a coach, like actually your coaching relationship.
yeah, so true. I think before setting any goal, it's important to ask, what would this look like at the end? So if for a second you guys are listening, you can maybe do this exercise, but imagine the version of you that's actually achieved everything you're working towards. What do you want that version of you to be able to reflect on and say about their journey? And if you look back, it's probably not going to be that you sacrificed every single thing in your life for this, because you'll get there and it'll feel quite empty. But maybe it's that you still upheld your commitments to your family or your friendships, or you still upheld your commitment to your school or your work, whatever it might be. But you knew that you gave your best, you gave your all in so many areas. And that is satisfying. Whatever that looks like for you, whatever that vision was at the end, when you think, I'm up there on stage, I'm asked to give a speech, let's say you're asked to give a speech. What do you want to say? What would you say about your journey that's going to actually make you feel really, really proud to say it? Because the unfortunate truth is, like, you're not going to hear a champion up there probably saying that they're so happy and grateful that their marriage ended, or that unless it was really toxic, right? But they're positive things in their life hitting the back burner for a win is likely not going to make them feel much better. But it's having someone by their side and being there for them too. I think that's more important. Now, at least maybe that could be my biased perspective, but I would say the majority of the people that I tend to work with want to find and strike a balance between being a successful competitor and being able to manage other areas of their life without it feeling like they have to micromanage everything.
Absolutely. And, you know, a great example is like just life management outside of macros. I had a client come to me and she said, I know you work with X, Y, and Z suit company, but I've been sponsored by this company since 2013. Like, how do I switch? And I said, well, are you happy with them? Yeah. Well, why do you need to switch? Like,
Right.
you've obviously spent years building a great relationship with this. And I think people are so dogmatic with their thinking that they think that it must be this way all the time. And some coaches may work that way where you only wear like that suit company. But I think there's a lot of great suit makers, and I find value in all of them. And I find value in longevity of relationships. That's actually what's made my coaching business amazing, is just the fact that I can carry on for years with clients and help them withhold those relationships, and also help them grow the ability to, well, why are you thinking of switching? Do they not do your talk right? Have you ever talked to them about doing it differently? And then if they don't, maybe that is a problem. And we have gotten to a point where there are so many coaches and so many options out there. Instead of actually giving someone the chance to repair the relationship or actually get coached, you just jump to the next thing, and then you jump and jump and jump because you never learn how to have a conversation. And this is why I love my masters competitors, because they'll be the first to say, I realize I cannot do this, this, or this. And it's the first thing I'll put in their folder. Like, they can't do squats because they have a low back issue. And like, those people know that coaching revolves around working with people versus just being told what to do. It's a lot about management versus being told what to do.
That's such an awesome point. Like, really, when you think about that, as an athlete, you should be prioritized for who you are and what you want out of it versus who the coach is and what they want out of you. So I really appreciate that perspective. And I think, yeah, masters competitors, so wise, they've been through it in other areas of life. They've had other focuses too. And I think when we're younger and we're entering this sport, I know that in my last coaching relationship, I tried so much to make it work and it didn't. And you learn from that too. But also, like, every coach will be maybe a different experience for everybody. And I know for me, I value being with a coach who I can speak to about what I'm going through, who I don't feel afraid to talk to about anything. So that was a value of mine that I wanted to experience, and I wasn't. And I think it's important to know when to leave. But as you said, that should come after efforts have been made to maintain those relationships. And I mean, if I have problems with people, I try not to immediately leave. I try to present different solutions that could be possible before I do that, because there will be times where, yeah, leaving is on your mind in any relationship. So if you have solutions for that and both parties are willing to work at it, it's worth it. And I just feel like communication in the industry is currently that, yeah, if you're unhappy, leave. Or yeah, if you aren't getting a pro card in your first season as a nationally qualified competitor, leave. And look at all these coaches who have turned people pro versus these ones. But is that really what matters most? And how does that ratio, like, how many girls are on their roster? What's their ratio of competitors to pros? Or what is their ratio of girls who continue in the sport after? How many of them are happy and have their health in line too, and are given repair protocols? All of these things need to be considered. And it goes to your point of, like, doing it for you and knowing what you need versus, I'm just going to appease my coach because I'm afraid of disappointing them.
Yeah, who's in your pit crew? Can your tires go flat and your coach inflate them again? Or do they only work with smooth running vehicles? You need someone to get you out of the negative hormonal state when you reach it, the negative health mindset. Honestly, sometimes you need a coach to encourage you to get out of that relationship that's toxic and wrecking your prep and you're afraid to, and you need a place to go to help you out. There's there's just really no rules when it comes to compassion and caring when you're a coach.
So true. I mean, that's something I admire about you, is you're not just so knowledgeable, but you're also incredibly compassionate. And I feel like we're actually a working team versus just I'm following and ticking boxes. I feel like I'm able to express things to you and work on that. And so that's what I needed in my efforts to humanize my own process more and give myself longevity. Is like, I want someone who's taking me up higher, but also understands where I'm at each day and each week and is willing to work with me to take me there and believes in me to get there, but also knows like these things are important. And a lot of people will probably hear this and think like, but how do you actually communicate on that level? Like that seems scary or that's hard. It's easier to just leave. Of course it is, right? But if we can express how we feel and then what we think we need or what we think the person is experiencing. So for example, it might sound like, I feel as though you're neglecting me as an athlete because you're not responding to my check-ins within a week. I'm under the impression that you do care about me, so I wanted to run it by you and see if this is something that can change. That's going to come off a lot better than, oh my gosh, where's my check-in response? It's been over a week. You must not care about me. I'm leaving. And I actually just hired this person 2 weeks ago after I submitted my check-in. And I know it sounds like I'm mocking, but I'm doing that because it's unfortunate. There's coaches who like literally want to help you and they want to be there for you and you don't even give them a chance. And that can be applied in relationships too, friendships or significant other. It's like, I think you're the type of person who always wants to do right by me. However, this behavior made me feel this way. Can you help me understand what you actually mean? Or, hey, every time you shove food in my face because you think it's funny to tempt me, it actually feels like disrespect. And I know you want to respect me. So here's a better way to do that. Here's a better way to respect my goals. When we learn how to talk about what our needs are and set boundaries in a way that maintains relationships, we can filter out in a healthy way. So we're not looking back in our lives like, did I lose someone that I shouldn't have? Did I not express that how I could have? What if I could have given them a better chance? We reduce what ifs and we increase relationship satisfaction when we actually give people the opportunity to bond with us or improve for us. Just like we would want someone to say to us like, oh, when you complimented my outfit and you said it kind of looked like this, it made me feel like you didn't actually like the outfit. So can you clarify? That just feels better. So it's always important to prioritize that when I think keeping a healthy mental game going and being able to focus on our protocols.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's much better to have the small awkward conversation that you can build your relationship off of versus a really awkward conversation and it's just complete separation. And this is where you can really have a special relationship and dynamic with your coach as long as you are vocal about things.
So true. Me and you have had awkward conversations and it led to great things, it was no big deal.
Yeah.
And I know there's people you've probably wished would have had those awkward conversations with you.
Yeah, we've gotten so far into your internal health now that we found things I think you've been dealing with for a long time that we didn't even know were an issue. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it gets me so excited. It's like awesome. But anyway, back to the subject. This is another thing I was actually curious about, Adam. What do
Yeah.
you personally believe it takes to be a champion in this sport? Like someone who's listening who wants to become a pro or win it overall or even go further in their pro career, like what do you think it really takes?
I think honestly, it's something that maybe a lot of coaches aren't willing to give, but I think it takes learning. I think it takes a lot of learning and understanding your process. And a lot of coaches don't want to take the time because they either don't know or they're afraid that they're going to create the next best coach. But however, how can we expect people to follow this unless we teach them about it, teach them about why this might be the best option for your long game as a competitor, for your health, especially now we have some really amazing genetic leaders in the sport. And I think it's very saturated at the pro level on a very very top end, where Tyler has even had to make a video about how finite the criteria is, just to remind people, because there's so many darn good pros right now. And we need to teach people about the process so they can trust the process. Trust is earned, not necessarily expected. And this is why I do a Zoom hour every day. People can hear other people's check-ins, why we're doing these changes, how we're fixing SIBO or other gut or hormonal issues, or here's the medication my doctor gave me. What do you think about it? We want to teach people everything so they understand. And yeah, could they turn around and coach? I did a damn good job if they can.
Yeah, so true. And I think that a lot of times, even if that did happen, like they become a coach, they always respect you because you learned or you taught them and they learned from you. And right, maybe not always. There's some people who will disrespect you anyways, but majority of people will hopefully like remember what you gave them. And I think the totality of this message here is to progress in this sport and become a champion. Like, make sure you have people who are like championing for you, like not just yourself advocating, but also your coach. And I guess my last take on this would be that when it comes to food relationship, body image, and just your overall mental demands of this sport, make sure that you're willing to work with someone who will point out your blind spots too. I've had a lot of clients who come in with really rigid mentalities, hence their all or nothing thinking or catastrophizing or other types of struggles with their thought processes. And then when I challenge them with a different perspective, or I challenge them to try something new, they're generally grateful, because if they hired me, it's to change something. So they're usually willing to try something, as I'm sure you've experienced. And then that unlocks a new point of view, a new perspective. So if you want your reality to be different and you don't feel like you have longevity in this sport or balance, or you feel like you have to give up competing to have success in other areas, I hope that this message we're sharing today helps you to see that you can get different guidance, or maybe your mind just needs to be shifted in a particular direction or open in a way that you can try something new. And instead of saying, I'm done with this, we can say, I'm just going to try this one tweak and see how that makes me feel. And then I'll try this next one, even if it is a challenge to what I think is required to be successful, or it's a challenge to what I've done in the past or what I see others do. I'm willing to do it for my dream of continuing. So I hope that that inspires people who are listening and feel on the edge of wanting to give up because they can't maintain other things, to know that maybe there is a way through. And of course, they can contact me, they can contact you and get support with that.
Absolutely.
Anything else to add?
I can't think of anything. I just am glad for the people who are listening to this, and hope that they can find everything they want out of the sport.
Yeah, me too. Honestly, I think that is possible. I know it's possible. And I hope that if you guys were, excited about this, or you enjoyed listening, please share it with other competitors, let them know, or maybe pass this on to someone you think could use it or benefit from it. And of course, we appreciate when you guys share it or leave comments. That's always fun to see. So in the meantime, I think we've got, what do we have, like one more episode of this series planned, I think?
One more, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, bittersweet. I'm sure we'll do more in the future. But in the meantime, you guys, thanks for tuning in again, and have a great rest of your day.